The beast, a magnificent Ithorian war leader named Thea, lay helpless in the crater, her multi-layered hide slick with rain. The neural disruptor embedded in her armor had backfired, paralyzing her from the neck down. The rest of her squad had already extracted. The transport's engine screamed as it ascended, disappearing into the storm-racked sky. Inside, a squad leader barked into his comm, his four mouths moving in practiced unison. "It is illogical to waste resources on a lost cause, soldier. Our strategic objectives outweigh sentimentality." Stephen Hall crunched through the rocky terrain, the beam of his headlamp cutting through the downpour. He'd been scavenging for replacement seals for the outpost's hydroponics bay when he noticed the abandoned transport, its heat signature fading rapidly on his scanner. Something wasn't right. Cautiously, he approached the crater's edge, his medical kit bumping against his thigh. The rain, a constant, corrosive drizzle, sizzled against his protective suit. He activated his comm, hoping to reach the Ithorian transport. Static crackled in his ear before a pre-recorded message began to play in a cold, mechanical voice. "To all inquiries regarding Ithorian military personnel designated as unrecoverable, resource allocation protocols dictate that retrieval efforts are suspended in situations with low probability of success. Individual sacrifices are deemed necessary for the greater strategic good. Please refer to Regulation 347 Theta for further clarification." End transmission. A groan echoed from the crater floor. Stephen descended carefully, his boots slipping on the wet rocks. The Ithorian war leader, Thea, stirred, her massive hammerhead lifting slightly. Her many eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were clouded with pain and confusion. "What do you want, human?" she rasped, her voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the rain-soaked air. Stephen ignored her hostility, kneeling beside her prone form. He ran a diagnostic scan with his handheld device, the screen displaying a cascade of error messages. "Neural disruption," he muttered, "extensive paralysis, without advanced medical intervention." He trailed off, knowing the outpost's limited resources were woefully inadequate. Moving Thea was a monumental task. Her sheer size and weight were immense, and the slick crater walls offered little purchase. Every movement sent jolts of pain through his own aching muscles. The acid rain intensified, eating away at the seams of his suit. He gritted his teeth, pushing onward, driven by a force he couldn't quite explain. A low growl broke the silence. A small reptilian predator, no bigger than a terrestrial dog, emerged from the shadows, its eyes glinting hungrily in the lamplight. It circled Thea, sensing her immobility. Stephen grabbed a sonic scalpel from his kit, activating it with a high-pitched whine that sent the creature scrambling back into the darkness. A temporary reprieve at best. "You expect me to believe this is altruism?" Thea's voice dripped with suspicion. "Humans are not known for their selfless acts." Stephen ignored the barb, focusing on the task at hand. He finally managed to drag Thea to a shallow cave, the entrance partially shielded from the relentless rain. "Shelter," he said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Warmth, hydration." He pulled a canteen from his pack, offering it to her. The water was lukewarm and metallic tasting, but it was all he had. The planet, designated LX-499, was a hellscape. Volatile temperature swings were common, plummeting from scorching heat during the day to near freezing at night. Resources were scarce, and the atmosphere was barely breathable without a filtration system. "I couldn't." The thought flashed through Stephen's mind, unbidden. A quick cut of a memory, a battlefield, smoke and chaos, a wounded soldier pleading for help, Stephen frozen, unable to fire his weapon to save him. The memory faded as quickly as it came. "I am Thea," the Ithorian said, her voice heavy with resignation. "I was a war leader. Now, I am nothing." Stephen glanced at the deactivated neural disruptor, then at the abandoned transport. What valuable tech had been left behind? What information? The Ithorians were pragmatic, ruthless even. They wouldn't leave a war leader to die unless the potential gains outweighed the cost. The Ithorian military, Thea continued, her voice barely audible above the rain, prioritizes strategic assets, individual lives. They are expendable, especially when the probability of success is minimal. Inside the cave, the air hung thick with the smell of damp stone and something faintly metallic. Stephen ran his hand along Thea's massive neck, feeling for a pulse. Her skin was cool, clammy. Neural feedback, he muttered, his fingers tracing the lines of burn marks around the base of her skull. Spinal injury. Complete paralysis from the, equivalent of the neck down. Thea's multifaceted eyes flickered. The neural disruptor, she rasped, her voice strained. A weapon of considerable tactical advantage. It scrambles the central nervous system, inducing temporary paralysis. But this time the feedback was too great. She gestured with a slight movement of her head toward a panel on her massive chest armor. Controls. There, you may learn something. Stephen ran his hand across the cool metal, finding the access panel. He opened it, revealing a complex array of circuits and glowing diodes. The cave itself seemed to exhale a musty breath. It was more than just a cave. The walls were unnaturally smooth in places, and sections of the ceiling were reinforced with what looked like durasteel plating. He stepped deeper inside, his boots crunching on discarded equipment. This wasn't just a cave. It was a former research site, abandoned in haste. Wires dangled from the ceiling and sparking occasionally. He found a damaged environmental suit, torn in several places but still mostly intact. Useless. Then a small medical kit, its contents scattered. He salvaged what he could, bandages, antiseptic wipes, and a single vial of painkiller. "This will help," he said, injecting the painkiller into a port on Thea's armor. A low groan escaped Thea's vocal sac. Ithorian military protocol dictates. Resources are allocated, strategically. Stephen shook his head. We don't leave our wounded behind. Back on Earth we have a saying, no man left behind. It's a promise. He remembered. A muddy battlefield, the screams, the metallic tang of blood. Thea's eyes, usually sharp and calculating, seemed to soften slightly. My campaigns have brought stability to several sectors. My people, they depend on strong leadership. Now, I am a failure. Further into the cave, Stephen noticed something etched into the wall, a map. It depicted the layout of the research outpost, but with one area highlighted in red, a restricted zone. Do you know what this is? He asked, tracing the lines with his finger. Thea studied the map. That sector. Experimental medical technology, advanced neural interfaces, or something far more dangerous. Suddenly, Thea's head snapped to the side. The armor. There is a distress beacon, I feel it. She paused, her expression hardening. But it is off, deactivated by my command. They want to ensure I am dead. The words hit Stephen like a physical blow. The battlefield. The soldier's face contorted in pain, the desperate plea for help, and his own helplessness. The image flashed in his mind clearer than ever before. He saw the man's eyes wide with fear, and then, nothing. A high-pitched screech echoed from outside the cave. It wasn't the cry of a bird or any animal he recognized. It was something predatory. Something specifically designed to hunt paralyzed creatures. He moved quickly, dragging the damaged environmental suit to the cave entrance. He rigged it as a tripwire, connecting it to a pile of loose rocks. He scattered debris around the entrance, creating a crude early warning system. Moments later, the rocks tumbled. A large, insectoid creature with razor-sharp mandibles burst into the cave, its multifaceted eyes gleaming in the dim light. It was easily 8 feet tall, with chitinous armor and powerful legs. Stephen grabbed a jagged piece of durasteel from the cave floor, wielding it as a makeshift weapon. The creature lunged, its mandibles snapping. He dodged, narrowly avoiding a fatal blow. The joints. Thea barked. Target the joints in its legs. The armor is weaker there. Stephen followed her instructions, striking at the creature's legs. The durasteel connected with a sickening crunch and the creature screeched in pain. It stumbled, giving Stephen an opening. He plunged the durasteel shard into the creature's neck, severing a major artery. The creature convulsed, its legs flailing before collapsing to the ground. Stephen stood panting, his body aching. He had a gash on his arm, bleeding freely. He looked at Thea. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Thea closed her eyes. "My second in command. His name is Jorak. Use the comm system on my armor. The access codes are 47 Alpha Tango 9. Tell him. Tell him I did my duty." Stephen checked the medical kit again. The painkiller vial was almost empty. Thea's breathing was becoming more labored. He needed more medicine and fast. The map, the restricted zone, it was his only lead. "I'm going to the outpost," he said, "to get medical supplies and to transmit your message." Thea's eyes snapped open. Why help me? "I am of no use to you now. Your people left you to die," Stephen said. "Why risk yourself for someone whose own military abandoned them?" Stephen paused, looking directly into Thea's multifaceted eyes. "Because everyone deserves a chance. Everyone deserves to live. We don't get to decide who's worthy and who isn't. That's not how it works. I'm not leaving you, Thea." The words were out before he could fully process them, a stubborn defiance hardening his tone. He knelt beside her massive form, the acid rain still hissing against his armor. "I know I can help. No more." The thought slammed into him, unbidden. A flash of memory. A younger Stephen, scrambling across a smoke-filled battlefield, reaching for a fallen comrade only to have his hand close on empty air as a mortar shell ripped through what was left. The man's name, Jax, echoed in the silence of his mind, a ghost of a promise broken. "I promised I wouldn't let anyone die again." Thea studied him, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim light. "Human, you risk much for sentiment." He met her gaze unflinching. Maybe I'm just tired of watching people die when I can do something about it." A low rumble vibrated from Thea's chest. A sigh, perhaps. "The outpost. It is laid out in a grid. Sector 7 is medical, 9 engineering, 12 research. The restricted zone. They will have reinforced security there." She paused, the effort of speaking clearly taxing her. "The ventilation shafts. They are barely large enough for a human, but they connect most sectors." Stephen nodded, relief washing over him. That's more than I hoped for, thank you." He began gathering the few supplies he had. A half-empty ration pack, a medkit with dwindling supplies, his multi-tool. He reinforced the cave entrance with loose rocks, knowing it wouldn't hold much, but every second counted. "The restricted area," Stephen began, his voice low, kneeling near Thea. "Why so much security? What's in there?" Thea hesitated, a flicker of something fear crossing her face. "Experiments, dangerous ones, and whispers of a prototype, a neural regeneration device. They say Dr. Thorne is obsessed, trying to rebuild minds, fix what is broken." The words hit Stephen like a jolt. Neural regeneration. It was a long shot, but it was a shot nonetheless. He swallowed, the hope a bitter taste in his mouth. "Then that's where I'm going." He ventured out into the storm, the acid rain stinging his exposed skin. The wind howled, carrying the stench of decaying vegetation and something else. Something feral. He consulted the crude map Thea had sketched in the dirt, marking the known predator territories. The hulking shadows of the rock formations offered scant protection. He moved quickly, silently, relying on the ingrained instincts of a soldier, instincts he thought he'd buried long ago. He skirted a ravine, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood. Then, half hidden beneath a tangle of thorny vines, he saw it. A narrow, almost invisible access tunnel leading into the research outpost's perimeter fence. Time to blend in. He unpacked his medkit, extracting a vial of luminescent algae paste. Mixing it with a solvent, he created a sickly green dye, smearing it across his face and the exposed parts of his armor. He adjusted his helmet, trying to mimic the disinterested gait of the outpost personnel he'd observed during his initial scans. He watched the outpost for hours, memorizing patrol patterns, noting the placement of surveillance cameras, deciphering the rhythm of the access codes punched into the security panels. It was a dance of observation and calculation, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. He noticed that the patrols were doubled near the research sector, a crackle from his helmet comm. Human, Thea's voice strained but clear. Containment breach, Sector 12. I'm intercepting chatter, they are searching. Stephen froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. Containment breach. Something had escaped, something dangerous. He took a breath, forcing himself to focus. He had to move now. He approached the initial security checkpoint, his heart a drum against his ribs. He straightened his posture, affecting a bored expression. Medical supply delivery, he said, his voice flat, holding out a fabricated data slate. Requesting access to Sector 7. The guard, a hulking figure in full combat armor, scanned the slate, his eyes narrowed. Identification code. Stephen rattled off a string of numbers he'd memorized from his observations, praying it was the right one. The guard hesitated, then punched the code into the console. A green light flashed. Proceed. INE was in. Inside, the outpost was a labyrinth of sterile corridors, the air thick with the antiseptic scent of disinfectant and something else. Something metallic and vaguely unsettling. He navigated the maze, consulting the map he'd copied from the cave wall, his senses on high alert. Rounding a corner, he nearly collided with a maintenance worker, a small, wiry man with grease-stained overalls and a nervous demeanor. "Whoa there, friend," the worker said, his eyes darting around. "Didn't see you coming. New around here, aren't you?" Stephen nodded, forcing a smile. INST transferred in, looking for Sector 12. The worker's eyes widened. Sector 12, that's Dr. Thorne's domain. You don't want to go poking around there. He's changed lately, obsessed with his work. Neural tech, says he's on the verge of a breakthrough. The worker shuddered. Been acting real erratic. Keep to yourself if you can. Stephen thanked him for the warning and continued on his way, the worker's words hanging heavy in the air. Dr. Thorne. The name sent a shiver down his spine. He reached the restricted area, a massive, reinforced door guarded by two heavily armed security personnel. A complex keypad glowed ominously beside the entrance. High-level access code required. "Thea," he whispered into his comm. "I'm at the door. It's locked down tight." A pause, then Thea's voice infused with a hint of grim amusement. "The security system. It is old, primitive. There is a manual override, a power coupling in sub-level 3. Cut the power. All sectors linked to that coupling will fail." Stephen weighed the risks. Cutting the power would create chaos, but it might be his only chance. "All right," he said, his voice tight. "Cutting the power." He found the power coupling in a dingy maintenance closet, a tangle of wires and conduits humming with terrifying energy. He took a deep breath, steeling his nerves. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he severed the main power line. The lights flickered, died. Alarms blared, the sound echoing through the outpost. Red emergency lights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows. He sprinted back to the restricted area, the chaos his only cover. He punched in the emergency override code, a series of random numbers he'd gleaned from the maintenance worker, and the door hissed open. But as he stepped inside, a piercing alarm shrieked through the corridor. Red lights flashed, bathing the area in an ominous glow. He was exposed. He heard the heavy thud of approaching footsteps, the click of weapons being armed. Security forces were converging on his location. He had to get out. He turned and ran, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He dodged around corners, vaulted over obstacles, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. He spotted a maintenance ladder leading up to the rafters, a narrow space above the corridor. He scrambled up the ladder, pulling himself into the shadows just as the security forces rounded the corner, their weapons raised. He pressed himself against the cold metal, his breath held tight, watching as they swept through the area, their faces grim, their eyes scanning for any sign of intrusion. He was hidden for now, but he knew with a chilling certainty that it was only a matter of time before they found him. Stephen scrambled through the narrow ventilation shaft, the recycled air thick with the metallic tang of the outpost. He kept low, the grating digging into his back, each movement punctuated by the clang of metal against metal, sounds he prayed wouldn't alert security. He risked a peek through a vent opening, catching a glimpse of a sterile lab below. Voices drifted up, distorted but audible. "The Thea Project is paramount, Dr. Thorne," a crisp, authoritative voice stated. "The Dominion will pay handsomely for a targeted paralysis weapon. Ithorian physiology is uniquely suited." Thorne's voice, smooth and chilling, replied, "The neural pathways are proving resistant, but the recent malfunction, it's a breakthrough. The key, I believe, lies in replicating that initial cascade." Stephen recoiled. Thea's paralysis wasn't random. It was a target. They were trying to weaponize it. He pressed on, the revelation a cold knot in his stomach. He needed to find a way to help her, and fast. He found a junction in the vents, branching off into multiple directions. One was labeled Restricted Access Neural Research. He followed it, the air growing colder, carrying a faint, acrid smell. The vent opened into a small, disused observation room overlooking a hidden lab. Inside, holographic displays flickered with neural scans. Data logs scrolled across screens, detailing experiments on alien subjects, their bodies contorted in unnatural positions. Video recordings showed the brutal reality: precise neural incisions, electrical stimulation, attempts to induce paralysis through targeted energy bursts. One log marked "Regeneration Prototype" caught his eye. The video showed a subject, initially paralyzed, regaining motor function after a complex procedure, but the notes indicated the process was unstable, prone to catastrophic neural collapse. Still, it was a chance. A desperate one, but a chance nonetheless. The log mentioned a prototype neural regeneration device, stored in a secure vault within Thorne's private lab. A scraping sound echoed through the vents. Stephen froze, pressing himself against the metal. A cleaning crew, he cursed silently. He had to move, but where? The scraping grew louder, closer. He was trapped. The vent cover rattled, then popped open. A young woman in a maintenance uniform stared back at him, her eyes wide with surprise. "What the?" Stephen acted quickly, pulling himself out of the vent and grabbing her arm before she could raise an alarm. "I'm not who you think I am," he whispered urgently, flashing his faded medical credentials. "I'm investigating what's going on here. Those experiments, they're monstrous." The woman hesitated, studying his face. Her name tag read Maya. "I've seen things," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Things I can't unsee, but what can I do? Help me get into Thorne's lab," Stephen pleaded. "There's a device there, a neural regenerator. It might be able to help someone who's been paralyzed." Maya bit her lip, her eyes darting around nervously. "Thorne, he's suspicious of everyone. Security is tight if we get caught." "I know the risks," Stephen said, his voice firm. "But if we don't do something, those experiments will continue. People will suffer." After a moment of tense silence, Maya nodded, her decision made. "Okay," she whispered. "I can get you a maintenance uniform and a temporary access code. Shift change is in 15 minutes. It's our best chance." Maya handed him a clean uniform, the fabric stiff and smelling faintly of disinfectant. She then punched a series of numbers into a handheld device and gave it to him. "Temporary access code. It'll get you through the outer checkpoints, but be careful. Thorne monitors everything." Stephen changed quickly, the uniform feeling like a thin shield against the horrors he'd witnessed. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The shift change was chaotic, a flurry of hurried footsteps and mumbled greetings. Stephen kept his head down, mimicking the weary gait of the other maintenance workers. He scanned his access code at the checkpoint, the green light flashing, granting him entry. He moved through the corridors, the hum of machinery filling the air, the weight of his mission pressing down on him. Thorne's lab was located at the end of a long, sterile corridor. He swiped his access card again, the door hissing open to reveal a brightly lit chamber filled with complex equipment. A large, reinforced vault dominated one wall, the neural regeneration device, he presumed. But the vault door was protected by a complex biometric lock, a web of glowing sensors scanning for a specific neural signature. "Thea," Stephen whispered into his comm, "I'm in Thorne's lab, but there's a biometric lock on the vault. Any ideas?" A moment of silence, then Thea's voice crackled in his ear. "Ithorian neural interfaces. They share certain frequencies with other advanced systems. Try bypassing the tertiary sequencer. There should be a subroutine that mimics a cranial pulse." Stephen's fingers flew across the control panel, guided by Thea's instructions. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, a language he barely understood, but Thea seemed to decipher it with ease. "Now, inject a phase shift modulator," she instructed, her voice strained but focused. "And bypass the retinal scan. Use the override code Omicron 7 Delta." He entered the code, his heart pounding in his chest. The vault door shuddered, then with a hiss of escaping air, swung open. Inside, bathed in a soft blue light, stood the neural regeneration device, a massive, intricate machine dripping with sensors and conduits. A live neural interface designed to connect directly to the patient's brain dominated the center of the device. "I've got it, Thea," Stephen whispered, relief washing over him. "I've got the device." "Excellent," a voice purred from behind him. "But I'm afraid your little rescue mission ends here, Dr. Hall." Stephen whirled around, his hand instinctively reaching for the discarded maintenance tool at his belt. Dr. Thorne stood in the doorway, a smug expression on his face. 2 security guards flanked him, their weapons trained on Stephen. "I knew you were too altruistic to be just another cog in the machine," Thorne said, his eyes glinting with amusement. The undercover investigator routine was quaint but ultimately predictable. Thorne pressed a button on the wall panel, a loud klaxon blared, and the lab doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. "Lockdown initiated," a robotic voice announced. "No escape possible." "What do you want?" Stephen demanded, his voice tight with anger. "What I want," Thorne said, his smile widening, "is to perfect my research, and you, Dr. Hall, are going to help me. Ithorian resilience is impressive. By weaponizing their paralysis, we can create super soldiers, soldiers that never die." He gestured towards the device. "I'm going to use that to perfect the process, and our paralyzed Ithorian friend will be my first test subject." Stephen lunged at Thorne, but the security guards intercepted him, pinning his arms behind his back. "Let me go," he shouted. Thorne chuckled. "Patience, Dr. Hall. You see, while you were busy playing detective, my security forces apprehended your little helper, Maya. She was quite forthcoming about your plans. I'm afraid any further resistance will have consequences for her well-being." Thorne activated a comlink. A grainy image appeared on a nearby screen showing Maya tied to a chair in a holding cell, her face pale with fear. "A word from our captive," Thorne said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Stephen, don't," Maya cried, her voice trembling. "Don't do anything he says, it's not worth it." Stephen's heart sank. He was trapped. Outmaneuvered, he looked from Maya's terrified face to Thorne's triumphant grin. He had no choice. "All right," Stephen said, his voice defeated. "All right, you win. What do you want me to do?" Thorne's smile widened. "Excellent. Now we're going to transport you and the regeneration device back to the surface, to our Ithorian friend. I have a feeling she's going to be very cooperative." A new era of galactic peace. Thorne chuckled, the sound echoing unnervingly in the sterile white chamber. Or perhaps an era of human dominance. Details, details. He gestured towards the neural regeneration device, its metallic arms poised over Thea. "Soon, war leader Thea, you will be more than just a paralyzed Ithorian. You will be the prototype, the key to an army." He turned to a technician, his eyes gleaming with manic energy. "The reports, are they confirmed? Are the subjects en route?" "Yes, Director Thorne," the technician replied, his voice tight with apprehension. "The transport carrying the first batch of Ithorian volunteers is expected within the hour. They are eager to receive the treatment." Thorne clapped his hands together, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "Excellent. Soon we will have an Ithorian legion loyal only to us. Imagine an army of these brutes, their minds ours to command. No more messy rebellions, no more complications." Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights pulsed, bathing the room in an ominous glow. "What is the meaning of this?" Thorne barked, his composure momentarily shattered. "Unknown, Director," the technician stammered, frantically tapping at his console. "A in-Eichel emergency reported in. Cell block Gamma, prisoner hall." The scene shifted abruptly. Stephen, now confined within a narrow, shielded cell, pressed his ear against the cold metal. The air crackled with suppressed energy. He could feel the dampness of his own sweat on his brow. Maya was visible in the adjacent cell, her face etched with fear. "They know," he thought, his heart pounding, "but maybe not everything." He took a shaky breath, focusing on the pain blooming in his arm. He'd slammed it against the cell wall moments before, hard enough to bruise, hoping to trigger a convincing reaction. He willed his breathing to become ragged, his pulse to quicken. "Cell block Gamma," a distorted voice crackled over the comms. "Report." Stephen groaned loudly, clutching his arm. "Medic. I need a medic. Internal bleeding, I think." He let his voice trail off, feigning unconsciousness. The alarm silenced as abruptly as it began. "False alarm," the voice announced. "Suspect prisoner attempting diversion. Rescind medical assistance. Increase cell suppression." Stephen cursed silently. It hadn't worked, but the brief chaos had bought him something, a closer look at the cell's locking mechanism. He'd noticed a faint flicker in the power regulator, a subtle weakness in the design. A faint tremor vibrated through the floor. The transport was moving. Suddenly, a voice, distorted but undeniably Thea's, filled his mind. "Human, they are rerouting you. Security Grid 7 Alpha is compromised. Ambush point at Sector 4 Delta." "I hear you," Stephen thought back, focusing his mind, trying to amplify his thoughts. "Thank you." He reached into his boot, his fingers closing around a small, sharpened bone fragment, a souvenir from a particularly grim meal. It was his last, desperate hope. He began to carefully, painstakingly manipulate the power regulator, using the bone fragment as a makeshift tool. Sparks flew as he bypassed safeties, his movements precise and deliberate. A jolt ran through the cell. The lights flickered violently, then died, plunging him into darkness. The suppression field vanished. He was free. But the alarms blared again, louder this time, accompanied by a klaxon that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. "Prisoner hall has breached containment." The voice shrieked. "All units converge on Sector 7 Alpha. I repeat, prisoner hall is loose." Thorne's face appeared on a small screen embedded in the cell wall, his features contorted with rage. "Redirect the transport. Take them to the training arena, now." The tremor intensified. The transport lurched violently, changing course. Stephen knew with a sinking feeling that he was heading into a trap. The cell door hissed open. He could see Maya in the adjacent cell, her eyes wide with terror. "Stephen, no," she cried. "They'll kill you." Thorne's voice boomed from the comms. "One more step, Hall, and your little friend gets to experience the joys of paralysis firsthand. I trust you understand." The transport shuddered to a halt. The doors opened, revealing a large, circular arena bathed in harsh, flickering light. In the center, strapped to a metal table, was Thea. Thorne stood beside her, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Welcome to my laboratory, Dr. Hall. Your skills are required. Now treat the patient, administer the neural regeneration sequence, or watch your friend become another compliant Ithorian." Stephen hesitated, his mind racing. He had to buy time. He had to find a way out. He approached the device, his eyes scanning the controls. He knew Thorn was watching his every move. He began to input the parameters, subtly altering the programming, using his medical expertise to counteract Thorn's modifications. It would only buy him a few minutes, maybe less, but it was all he had. He initiated the sequence. The device hummed to life, bathing Thea in a soft blue light. Even in her paralyzed state, Thea recognized the subtle changes in the device's energy signature. She knew what Stephen was trying to do. A flicker of something akin to hope sparked in her eyes, but then a wave of resistance washed over him. He could feel Thea fighting the treatment, creating a feedback loop in the device. "Stop," Stephen thought desperately, his voice tight with suppressed panic. "You'll damage the machine. You'll expose me." Thorn, oblivious to the internal struggle, stepped closer to Thea, his voice dripping with false concern. "What's wrong, my dear? Not enjoying your upgrade? I will not allow my people to become your puppets," Thea growled, her voice strained but defiant. "The Ithorian military will not be controlled by humans." Thorn's smile vanished. He glanced at the device, his eyes narrowing. He noticed the energy fluctuations, the subtle anomalies in the readings. "What have you done?" he hissed, turning to Stephen, his face contorted with fury. Before Thorn could react, the arena plunged into darkness. The security cameras flickered and died. Chaos erupted. "What the hell is going on?" Thorn roared, his voice lost in the sudden cacophony. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with a speed and precision that belied their size. A hand clamped down on Thorn's wrist, disarming him with a swift, practiced motion. "Enough, Thorn," a cold, authoritative voice cut through the darkness. A single spotlight illuminated the newcomer, Commander Eva Rostova, the outpost's commanding officer. Her face was grim, her eyes hard. "I've been watching you for a long time, Thorn," she said, her voice filled with steel. "Your little experiments are about to be exposed. The Galactic Federation will be very interested to hear about your unauthorized research." Thorn spluttered, his face pale with shock. "Rostova, you wouldn't dare. This is for the good of humanity." Rostova ignored him, turning to Stephen. "Dr. Hall, I presume, I must commend your resourcefulness. However, you are mistaken if you believe I intend to simply shut down Thorn's operation." She gestured to a technician who stepped forward, holding a small vial filled with a shimmering, iridescent liquid. "Thorn's methods were crude," Rostova continued, her voice taking on a chilling edge. "But his research has yielded promising results. A bioweapon capable of targeting specific genetic markers. Imagine, Dr. Hall, a galaxy free from the threat of alien aggression. A galaxy where humanity reigns supreme. She weaponizes a virus which she threatens to use." Rostova raised the vial, her eyes gleaming with fanaticism. "The future of humanity is within our grasp. And I will not let anything or anyone stand in our way." Rostova, eyes blazing with fanaticism, slammed her fist onto the activation rune. A shimmering wave of violet energy pulsed outwards from the device, washing over the room. "For the purity of the galaxy," she screamed, spittle flying. The air crackled with ozone. "The Ithorian menace ends now." Stephen felt at first a searing pain in his chest, a tightening in his lungs. He knew the virus targeted Ithorian physiology, but Rostova's modifications were unpredictable. Images flashed through his mind, the faces of fallen comrades, the helplessness he felt as he watched them die. He wouldn't let that happen again. Not to Thea, not to anyone. He lunged forward, grabbing a discarded syringe filled with a modified retroviral inhibitor he'd been experimenting with. A desperate gamble, a long shot. "Stephen, no," Maya cried, but it was too late. He plunged the needle into his arm, injecting himself with the altered virus. His vision swam. "You fool," Rostova shrieked. "You've doomed yourself," Stephen gasped, fighting for breath. "Maybe," he managed, his voice ragged, "but I bought you time." The violet energy faded, now focused on him. His skin flushed, veins pulsing visibly beneath the surface. Maya, her face a mask of concentration, worked furiously at her console. Data streams cascaded across the screen, algorithms churning, calculations flashing. The human body is reacting. Altering the viral structure, she announced, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I can use this. Thea, I need a blood sample, now. Thea, despite her paralysis, remained alert, her mind sharp. She focused her will, subtly manipulating the bioelectric currents within her own body, a technique Ithorians used to communicate with flora. It was a risk, but she managed to trigger a micro-rupture in a surface vessel, drawing a bead of crimson blood. Maya carefully extracted the sample, combining it with Stephen's altered blood. Thea's unique physiology. It's stabilizing the human mutation, a universal antidote, almost ready. The synthesizer hummed, glowing with an ethereal light. Rostova, realizing her plan was unraveling, reached for a plasma pistol. I'll finish this myself. But Thea anticipated her move. Focusing her remaining mental energy, she overrode the pistol's safety protocols, sending a surge of feedback through Rostova's nervous system. The weapon sputtered, useless. Rostova screamed in frustration, dropping the pistol. Maya, sweat beading on her forehead, held up a vial filled with shimmering opalescent fluid. The antidote, it's ready. She injected Stephen. His body convulsed once, then relaxed. The flush faded from his skin. He coughed, taking a deep breath. As Stephen recovered, the deep thrum of Ithorian cruisers vibrated through the outpost. Thorne's plan had failed. Thea activated the comm system, her voice calm and authoritative despite her paralysis. This is War Leader Thea, she announced. To all Ithorian vessels, Thorne and Rostova have betrayed us. They sought to unleash a weapon upon our people, but a human, Stephen Hall, sacrificed himself to stop them. He acted with honor, with compassion. Trust him. Trust Maya. They are our allies. The lead cruiser responded immediately. War Leader Thea, we received a garbled distress signal. Thorne assured us it was a false alarm. What are your orders? Arrest Thorne and Rostova, Thea commanded. They are traitors to the Ithorian people, and prepare a medical team. I have much to tell you, much that will change everything. Moments later, Ithorian soldiers, their faces grim, stormed the lab, weapons drawn. Thorne and Rostova were quickly subdued, their faces contorted with rage and disbelief. The soldiers, witnessing Stephen's weakened state and hearing Thea's words, saluted him with newfound respect. The deep resonance of Galactic Federation cruisers filled the air. Alarmed by the Ithorian fleet's sudden shift in course, they had arrived to investigate. Beams of light scanned the outpost, cataloging the evidence of Thorne and Rostova's crimes. Thea, addressing the Federation representatives, spoke with unwavering conviction. This outpost engaged in unsanctioned biological warfare research. Thorne and Rostova sought to unleash a virus upon my people. But two humans, Stephen Hall and Maya Rodriguez, risked their lives to stop them. They acted with courage, with compassion, with a sense of justice that shames us all. The Federation officers, their expressions grave, assured her that a full investigation would be conducted. The wheels of galactic justice had begun to turn. Back on Ither, the High Council convened. Thea's testimony, coupled with the evidence uncovered by the Galactic Federation, led to a swift and decisive vote. The ancient Ithorian military protocol regarding wounded soldiers was officially rescinded. A new directive was issued. Every effort would be made to rescue and rehabilitate fallen warriors, regardless of the cost. Days later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, Stephen and Thea stood side by side, gazing at the alien landscape. Stephen was still weak but recovering. Thea remained paralyzed, but her spirit soared. The universe is vast, Stephen Hall, Thea said, her voice filled with a newfound warmth, and filled with possibilities. Your actions. They have opened our eyes to a new way of seeing. A Federation envoy approached Stephen. Dr. Hall, she said, the Federation, in conjunction with the Ithorian High Council, would like to offer you the directorship of a newly established interspecies medical program. Your compassion, your ingenuity, they are precisely what we need." Thea turned her massive head slightly towards Stephen, a hint of pride in her multifaceted eyes. Stephen, humbled and grateful, accepted the offer. "It would be an honor," he said. Thea, despite her paralysis, returned to Ither not as a war leader but as a symbol of change. Her voice, amplified by advanced technology, echoed across the plains, calling for unity, for understanding, for a future built on cooperation, not conquest. Stephen turned to Maya, his heart filled with gratitude and affection. "What do you say, Maya? Ready for whatever comes next?" Maya smiled, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Always," she said, taking his hand. "Always ready." They walked towards the transport ship, ready to build a new future together, one built on empathy, courage, and the unwavering belief in the power of human compassion.